Taxes was waiting around for your taxes to be done, which led to worrying about not getting any money back. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes in a day to get you up to $4,000 fast with a refund advance loan. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Expert filing only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Refund advance has $0 loan fees and 0% APR. Refund advance loans may be issued by First Century Bank N.A. or WebBank. Terms apply. Subject to approval.
When we started writing our thoughts down on paper, it opened up endless possibilities. Ideas could grow beyond the borders of the mind, and it changed the world. Somewhere along the way, we lost touch with paper, distracted by devices made for every purpose except for thinking and focus. On edge, waiting for the next notification. But what if new technology didn't pull us away from paper, but brought us closer to it? Listen. That's not paper. It's the sound of the new Remarkable Paper Pro, rewriting the future. A paper tablet with a true color ink display, gentle reading light, and unheard of tactility. With digital features for taking notes, thinking, and organizing, without any distractions. Paper is about to change the world again. Get your paper tablet at remarkable.com today.
Hello and welcome to the Ground Jewels. My name is James Dixon and I'm delighted you've joined us this week for a really special episode with the comedian Ian Moore. We talk Carrow Road with Ian, although you'll notice from the start of the interview that I didn't actually know that we're going to definitively be talking about Carrow Road until the interview itself began. And so that was quite fun. That was different. So yeah, it's good. It's not that focused on Carrow Road. So if you're joining us purely as a pure hardcore Norwich City fan, to hear what French-based comedian Ian Moore has to say about your football club stadium, thank you for the download. Take a break. I think you'll enjoy it still. But if you're here because you're a regular listener, you like discussions about grounds, football grounds, cricket grounds, etc. It's a really great interview. Ian's got so many stories, as you'd expect a comedian to have. But first, I just want to thank everybody who's got in touch over the last week or two over the recent episodes with Phil McGowan on Twickenham and Jared Kimber on the MCG. Both been incredibly well received, had some lovely comments. Always enjoy it when I get feedback about episodes in the archive. Just this week, someone texted me to say that they loved the Ian McMillan episode on Oakwell, and obviously it's a very popular episode, a really great chat. But yeah, if this is your first time with the Ground Jewels, do delve into that archive. This is what, episode 37 now, and so there's 36 other really good ones to choose from, whether you're interested in rugby league, whether you're interested in football, cricket, rugby union, American football, equestrian, rowing. We've got something for you. If you're baseball, if you're Gaelic football, if you're basketball, we haven't got anything for you yet. Although, as it stands, I'm very excited because tomorrow I will be recording an episode on Croke Park. So if you are thinking, when is he going to get around to talking Gaelic football and hurling? The answer is very, very soon. Speaking of getting around, let's go around the grounds. Let's get our regular sort of update on news from the world of stadiums. And I think we'll start this week in America because it's phenomenal. Obviously tragic what's happening in Los Angeles with the wildfires and everything like that. But NFL just moved so seamlessly into changing the venue of where one of their playoff games is happening. It's going, no, it's not going to be in LA anymore. We're going to go and do this all in Phoenix, and it just moves like a conveyor belt. I mean, I guess, when they treat whole cities and fan bases as interchangeable, maybe you shouldn't shouldn't be surprised, but it's just the speed that that organisation moves at and sort of treats geography as a mild inconvenience is sometimes impressive. They also announced the teams that were coming to Tottenham Stadium for the 2025 International Series: Jaguars, Jets, and Browns. Something tells me they're a little bit bored of London. Um, I think if you're going to be in Madrid or Dublin or Brazil or Mexico City this year or Germany, there's a chance you're going to get some better teams. Never mind. In Spain, there is news for the first time in sort of 16 years. Valencia are working on the new Mestalla. This was a construction project that began to replace the Mestalla Stadium, one of the great European football stadiums, much beloved old stadium down there in southeast Spain in Valencia. It started in 2007. It got snagged up in the 2008 financial crash. Work stopped in 2009. And there's been several abortive attempts to get that going again. It was supposed to be part of the 2030 World Cup, but it won't be because it won't be ready in time. And so, but yeah, it's interesting that this is happening, that the club are trying to do this. Obviously, there's lots of controversy with the ownership there, Peter Lim, etc. But yeah, let's see what happens. Let's see if this stadium, which has become a white elephant and a sort of derelict stadium before it's even been built, finally gets built, and whether it'll ever host football there. So that's interesting. And the other stadium news to note of the last week is there's been announced there's going to be a trial in the Women's Championship featuring Birmingham, Bristol City, Southampton, and Newcastle United, of football fans being allowed to drink alcohol in the stands within sight of the pitch. So it's been tried in the Women's Championship. I don't know where they're thinking about that limit of relaxing the rules comes in, but I think it's a good thing. One of the best things about non-league, that you can have a pint and watch it, watch a game, and there's treating stadium goers and fans who go to matches as infants does get a little bit tiresome. So yeah, hopefully the trial's successful and it can be extended. But enough about that. Let's hear from Ian Moore. So today on the Ground Jewels, we're joined by the comedian Ian Moore. You may know Ian from so many things over the years, but I first heard his laconic world viewpoint on the BBC Five live panel show Fighting Talk. And indeed, he is Fighting Talk's second most successful crime fiction writer. Ian, welcome to the Ground Jewels.
Thanks for that. Thanks for putting me in the same breath as Osman as well. He's done all right, hasn't he? It's no bad thing being second best to him, because I think anybody who has written a book in the last 4 or 5 years is some way behind him at the moment. So that's good.
I genuinely do not know which ground you've picked or are going to pick, and that's not through sort of indolence and laziness on my part. You were really indecisive. I hope that's fine. You were sort of torn between at least two grounds. Have you come to a decision?
I have come to a decision, and it's not necessarily my favourite ground, or even of my favourite team, but it's one that I went to a lot, or a fair amount, when I was very young, and so there's a lot of memories from it. Going back, and in fact, what year was it? 1980, 1981. John Fashanu, sorry, scored goal of the season, Norwich against Liverpool, and I was behind that goal at Carrow Road on a wooden box that my dad had built for me on the terraces, and obviously you're kind of packed in that situation. So even though it was fairly precarious, and there was waves of people sort of rushing to the front, or the wave sort of went to the front, and it kind of almost lifted off the box and carried. I never actually moved anywhere. I just kind of went sort of back and forth with the crowd as they in this wave of euphoria that they were in. But I remember it especially because my dad built the box, and we used to carry the box to Carrow Road.
See, So the ground we're going to be talking about is obviously Norwich City's Carrow Road. That soapbox thing is it's a sort of common. I don't know if tropes are, but it's sort of common experience when we talk to Simon Inglis about Villa Park, Richard Keys about Highfield Road. They both have this really strong memory of soapboxes. And obviously, for me, I'm born in '84. My first sort of exposure to the soapbox was John Major in the 1992 general election campaign, and they sort of fell out of favour since then.
Yes.
I don't know if it was John Major himself or probably more the Taylor report, which put pay to the wooden soapbox. But yeah, that must have then been like a common thing for football in the '80s. Then
It was, and it gave you a number of things. It gave you one, you were at the same eye level as what was 99% blokes around you. You were at the same mouth and ear level, which was possibly more important because you heard language that you'd never heard before, and vitriol and viciousness that you just hadn't come across, in primary school or at home. So it kind of gave you, it literally elevated you into this world that you were such a stranger to, and you felt older for being there. But also you know, it was either that or the dads had to hold you the whole time during a match, and I can't, I've got three boys. I cannot imagine having. I've got rheumatoid arthritis as it is now. I mean, I can't imagine how much worse I'd be if I'd had to lift my boys at every football match we'd ever been to.
yeah, it's just it's of a time, and it evokes something really.
It's very much, and also, I mean, when I first started doing stand up, quite a lot of the times you were in a corner of a pub, and the corner of a pub would just be the stage that would be prepared for you would just be like upturned beer crates with some, just a thin plank of wood on top of it, and it was sort of it was sort of very reminiscent of that. That you would be in this kind of precarious situation and surrounded by vitriol and bad language. It was very similar.
It's a perfect grounding for your career, I get, and but even in that pub setting, I know comedians play around with status all the time, but it's just that small elevation still was able to kind of give you the status and the microphone, and for people to kind of train their eyes on you.
Well, you have to have it. Otherwise, if you're not catching the audience's attention, there's plenty of gigs where I've been where you're not elevated at all, and you're on some badly lit dance floor somewhere, and it's virtually impossible because nobody knows that you're actually doing anything, despite the sound. No, I mean, especially in a pub, the worst kind of thing that happened in pubs is that you'd have there might be a live foot this happened more than once, that there'd be a live football match on, and then something like at half time the landlord would lay out this temporary stage set in front of the screen, and then just as the second half would start, so right, well, we've had it, no more football, turn that off, we're going to have some comedy now. And and you just wouldn't stand a chance. But at least you were elevated, so they knew where to aim their anger.
Wow, I thought they were going to try and squeeze you into like the to half time. Like, have you got a tight 10 that you can just do here?
No, it was so often we would just the pubs that would give these free comedy nights where free to enter. I mean, so that people genuinely didn't know what was going on. They were drinking in a pub, and all of a sudden they are part of an audience, largely against their will. But that's how. I don't know if it's the same now. I don't know if that still happens now, but that's certainly how we kind of started at the end of the 90s. That was where you did spring.
I had a very brief and very unsuccessful stand-up career, and there is that sort of still that culture of sort of bring a gig, and the people who were there
Yeah.
were either there for the alcohol and completely indifferent to the comedy, or press ganged into attending and supporting somebody else, and then you had this weird sort of omerta amongst these comedians, although we probably didn't even deserve to be called comedians, in that I couldn't possibly laugh at somebody else's joke in case the promoter thinks that they're funnier than me. So you've got this sort of stoic refusenik section of the audience, which is about 60%, and then you've got your friends who are
Yeah.
going insanely over the top for something that's just barely qualifies as whimsy, and they're pretending that it's the best thing that they've ever heard. It's such a weird sort of
Oh yeah.
atmosphere.
I remember things like that, and also that there'd be somebody who would go on first, but had brought like 10 mates with them, and so they'd go on first, they'd finish their set and leave, and all their mates would go as well. So you'd then be you'd then just be left with other comics and people who had had their evenings ruined. It was a tough old school.
Yeah, and whoever comes out of it deserves to, and if there is a meritocracy there within that world. Um, but yeah, at the time I had a vaguely successful job and a vaguely successful relationship, and I didn't want to comprise those because it looked to me like I would have to get rid of at least one of those to make it.
Stand up is not one of those things that you can do half-hearted. You've really got to throw everything
Mm.
you can into it because it's so difficult to start, and a lot of the nights, the early times you do it are quite brutal. So you've really got to want to carry on, and you've really got to sort of see an end game to it. I was very lucky in that my wife, we got married in 1997, and I'd been doing sort of opener spots for about a year, bit more than a year, and she had a really good job. So she said, "Look, you've got 2 years from now to make a go of it, and if you don't after 2 years, then you've got to grow up, get a proper job." And, and I managed to squeak in under the wire of the 2 years.
I wonder in her mind, and you'll never know, and you'll never know, I'll never know, but you'll never know whether she thought she was setting you up for this life, or whether she thought, oh, at least it'll just get it out of his
That's
system.
the thing. I don't know. I don't know. It's not something we ever talked about. You know,
Oh,
it's
don't,
interesting.
don't pull at that thread.
Oh no, certainly not. Certainly, but I mean, how different. Like, I mean, all the sliding doors and all of that business. But we wouldn't be in France because the reason why we were able to move to France is because I didn't. We had kids by the time, or we'd had one child by the time we moved to France. Natalie wasn't working or had given up work because she wanted to spend time with our son naturally. So we could live anywhere because I could. My whole life was commuting as it was. So yeah, God knows where we'd be.
Let's explore that geography as well, because you are based in France, obviously still working a lot in the UK. I think people will know, or people who do know you, think of you. Oh, I've said it as a Blackburn Rovers fan, but we're talking about Norwich and Carrow Road.
Yeah.
So, what's your sort of personal history with geography there? Why are we going to think about Carrow Road today?
Well, yes, I was born in Blackburn, and then my dad he was made redundant when I was 6, when he was working in Blackburn, and the next job he found within Philips Electronics was in Kings Lynn in Norfolk. So
Hmm.
what's that? An hour from Norwich? Hour and a half from Norwich? I don't know. My poor, I take everywhere by trains now. But yeah, so we lived out just outside of Kings Lynn, and we'd been to. I remember going to Ewood Park when I was very young. My first memory of being at Ewood Park, and I must have been 3 or 4, I reckon. And Blackburn were at home to Coventry City, but all I remember was the Coventry City goalkeeper, Jim Blythe, dressed all in green, and he does a goalkeeper's kick, just kicks it up into the air. That's all I remember. That's all I
Hmm.
remember from it. And then the next match I went to see at Ewood Park was a local derby with Bolton, which I remember being phenomenally cold day. Probably not much longer after that first match, but I do remember that the away end was particularly sparse, and there were just a group of lads from Bolton who managed to start a fire in in the Bolton end, which obviously could have been very very dangerous. But it was just they were just trying to keep warm. I don't think there was any kind of vandalism or protest involved. They were just very very cold. Um, so those are the first times I went to Ewood Park, and my granddad in the 60s was a baker in Blackburn, and he provided the meat pies to Ewood Park on match days. So there's all that connection there. But then when we moved to Norwich, you know, I got more into football, and my dad wanted to take me to matches, so we would go and see Norwich, and we'd go and see Blackburn. Didn't often play at Norwich because we weren't often at that point in the same division. So we went to see Liverpool a lot because obviously they had the big stars at the time. And we went to see the local derby with Ipswich, which you think about the tractor derby and you think this isn't going to be that vicious. It's the tractor derby. But I mean, when you're huddled in on standing on a fairly frail wooden box, it's almost like being in a battle. You're sort of swept along with the whole thing. So we'd go to Norwich quite a lot, but we'd always leave a couple of minutes before the end because we had to get out with the box, and my dad didn't want to sort of battle our way back to his car. So I remember there was one match, and Norwich were, I think, 2-1 up, and there was a few minutes left, and we left early. And we went to meet my mum and my little sister in the cafe in Debenhams in the centre of Norwich. And we got there, and then again, this would be 82, no, it would be earlier than that. It'd be 78. It'd be around 78, I think. And we met up with my mum and my sister in Debenhams in the cafe. And we heard these people come in just after us, and they were saying, "Oh, what an amazing finish! It was, it was never seen anything like it." And it was, and we had to ask. My dad asked these people on the next table, and Kenny Dalglish, who was my hero at the time, had scored 2 goals in the last minute, and we'd missed the entire crux of the fixture by leaving early. But it was, still enjoyed it. Watched it on Match of the Day.
Yeah. And you probably didn't see it as well, because it's not as like you could just like pull it up on your phone, or even wasn't even necessarily guaranteed to be on Match of the Day that night back then.
No, it was. I mean, it was because it was Liverpool, but yeah, we had no idea, no communication. We had no radio on us because we would walk into Debenhams, and like you say, no phones, no other way. No, I think you'd almost wait an hour for the Pinken to come out, which was the football evening paper that was fairly, it wasn't very regular and wasn't very widespread, but yeah, we had no idea.
Talk to your fellow fighting Martin Kellner a lot about the Pinken when he came on to wax lyrical about a rugby league ground. Quite typically, but yeah, Carrow Road's really interesting to me. You don't accidentally go to Norwich.
No, it's a bloody long way, Norwich. England's a small country, but Norwich takes hours to get to. This, really you're going through some kind of void somewhere on that A13 or A12, whatever it is. It is a long way off. And I've been back to Norwich quite a lot. I mean, we only lived there 4 years, but I've gigged in Norwich, and there's a very good. I don't know if it's still going. I hope it is, because it was a really great gig. But there was a gig at Carrow Road in the hospitality suite at Carrow Road, and it was a very well attended monthly gig, which I did a few times. And the green room for that gig was the Norwich City Players Bar, and it was one of the most, and I hope Norwich City fans and players will forgive me for this, but it's one of the most low rent players bars I've ever seen. In that it obviously there's no great trophy history with Norwich, so all 4 walls, or 3 walls, because a lot of it's window, but 3 walls are adorned by match reports and headlines from Norwich City's 1958-1959 FA Cup run, which ended in the semi-final stage. I think after replay, they lost against Luton. But it is incredibly small beer for any kind of players' lounge. And maybe it's changed now. Maybe they've updated it. I don't know. But this, it was relatively recently I was there. So it's quite funny when you walk out into a club and there's a club room, and they were certainly, the audience were mainly Norwich City fans. But you've come from this such, remember we almost got to a final 50 odd years ago, 60 years ago.
Because 59 was Nottingham Forest Luton, that FA Cup final. So yeah, they'd have fancied themselves to have a chance if they've got through. But
Exactly, and they lost to Luton.
almost a local rival, really, when you consider the geography of it. But it's strange because Norwich, as you mentioned at the they have been relatively successful for the size of place that they are in terms of seasons in the top flight. And obviously they had that amazing season, sort of 92-93, first year of the Premier League, became looked like they had a chance to win it
Yeah.
for a long part of that year.
Yeah.
And then you get the UEFA Cup campaign where they play Inter Milan and Bayern off the back of it. So you get that really. It's not a trophy. The only one they've got is sort of League Cup from the 80s. And
Yeah.
you look at their sort of great rivals, Ipswich, who've won the league with Alf Ramsey and have won the UEFA Cup. Even in that context of the tractor derby, or the Old Farm, or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
it must feel bad.
It's not great, is it? I mean, there's not. It's poor Norwich. I mean, there's not a lot, and I'm actually, even though I do have a soft spot for Norwich, I do think I get tired of this notion that you get promoted from the Championship to the Premier League, you then go straight down again, and then you go straight back up again, and then you go straight down again. And I just think that once you've done that 2 or 3 times, you should be demoted another league, so that you can actually, so that people get a chance, because you get the parachute payments constantly, so you're able to keep your squad. So your squad is automatically better than the rest of the Championship because it's already won the Championship. So you go back up again, but that squad isn't good enough for the Premier, and nothing ever changes. So yeah, I'd come down hard on clubs like that.
So if you made this new football czar, or what the football ombudsman, or whatever there's going to be, Norwich are getting demoted, West Brom are getting demoted, Southampton are getting demoted,
What?
all these
Yeah,
sorts
yeah,
of clubs.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 2 leagues, it's like 2 strikes and out. That's how I would put.
You've had your go, yeah. That's fair. It's fair enough. I think people like going to Norwich. I think it's an away day that if you do away days, people look forward to it. It's that trek, and it feels substantial. But also when you get there, it's very close to the train station. It's well situated against the river. It's a nice place, isn't it?
And it's non-threatening, isn't it? It's not. You don't think, well, you know what? I'm going to wear my Kevlar vest. I'm off to East Anglia. You don't. It doesn't instill that kind of fear, does it? But yeah, I mean, it's a really nice ground. It's a really nice compact ground, and obviously it's a well-run club. Um, yeah, I mean, I do have soft spots for that, for going to those matches. Maybe it's a kind of youth thing, but um, no, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I mean, we went to quite a few, and then after that,
Mm.
after we moved down to Sussex after that, and I went to Brighton, the old Goldstone ground, a few times, but we ended up
Oh yeah.
with Wembley more often. Um, not for I didn't go to many live football matches after that, to be honest with you. I went to Wembley to see Blackburn in the full members cup final against Charlton I think that was 85, and we won 1-0, a goal from Colin Hendry. And apart from that, I don't remember much about that day. There was a friend of mine who came with us, me, my dad, and 2 friends, and one of them was ill, so mainly just looking after him. And then I ended up at Wembley. 1989, I started a degree at the Polytechnic of Central London, and one of the modules was journalism. And he said, the tutor on the first day of this module in journalism just said, right, you're in Central London, go out and get a story. Just go out and get a story, and then you write it, and we'll come back and we'll look at how you've written it or what you've done and all that. And the only thing I could think about was that I knew that the next day England were playing Italy at Wembley, and this was '89. So this was I think it was a friendly.
Hmm.
And yeah, because it would have been October or something, October, November, '89. And I went to, I just tripped up at Wembley. They just got on the tube, went to Wembley because I knew that because I'd read somewhere that Italy were going to be training on the pitch that day, and I just turned up at Wembley, and this is like when there was no security whatsoever. So the enormous doors where buses used to drive in to the tunnel at Wembley, they were wide open, and I just walked in. I just walked in and went and stood by the side of the pitch as Italy were training. So there was Baresi, Maldini, a few of the other, I can't remember their names now, but a few, the whole Italian squad there, just knocking a ball about. And I just stood at the side and I had this like pen and notepaper in my hand to make it look like I was press. And every now and then the ball would come over to me and I'd just pass it back to Maldini and stuff like that. And it was just the most astonishing experience that you could just walk in and do that. And I mean, looking back now, you'd think that's nuts. But you know, it worked. It's amazing. It was amazing. I tell my kids that now, and they look at me like you're just making this up, aren't you?
It's the access to stadiums has necessarily changed, and obviously the infrastructure of stadiums changed a lot after Hillsborough and Taylor Report, as we met. But then you get that second wave of almost securitization after sort of September 2001, and everyone's much more heightened about public spaces.
Yeah.
But there is a lovely sort of nostalgic element where these superstars were a bit more accessible and people like yourselves. Do you remember the story that you found? What was the story that you filed off the back of that? Like Paolo Maldini's good?
I think, yeah, I just think it's something. It was something weak. It was something really. Italy looked good. Italy look up for it. It was,
Yeah.
I'm not
Nil
even sure.
nil nil the next day.
Yeah, they were just hardly building it up. It was just I can't remember the story. I know that the tutor didn't like it. He just thought it was a bit weak that we were
Hmm.
in central London, but I'd gone off to Wembley just to watch some blokes kick a ball about. He wasn't into his sport, that tutor, as I remember. But there is this thing about access to stadium, and I do appreciate it. Obviously, it's had to change massively, so and people like that now can be targets and all of that. But I also remember another time I was recording a TV show in Melbourne, and they flew us out to do this TV show, and I was only supposed to be in Melbourne for 24 hours, which is basically the same length as a flight. So I said, look, can I just stay on a few days? And I'd never been to Australia at that point before, and I was just wandering around. And I just wanted to see some stuff, and I ended up at the NCG, a huge behemoth of a stadium, absolutely enormous, great place. But there was an open door. Again, there was an open door, and I just went in and I didn't go onto the pitch, obviously, but like standing in the stands of the MCG, and you're the only person there. And there's an element of Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams about this, in that you're standing there, but you can hear the crowds, what you've seen on television, and you can hear the sport being played, and it's a really ghostly but really warm feeling that I get from empty stadia like that, and I absolutely adore it. I tried to do the same in Mumbai when I was working out there, doing a load of comedy gigs in Mumbai, and I tried to get into the Wankhede Stadium, um, and I thought I'd found a way in, but this stray dog, this stray dog wouldn't leave me alone, and I had to keep running away from this stray dog because obviously I didn't know what I was going to get bitten by if I was going to get bitten at all. But I just love the being at empty stadium, and I've been at loads. Because like you say, stadia have changed massively. So many of them now have these conference and banqueting facilities, and I get booked a lot for corporate work and after dinner work and all of that. So and what happens is more often than not, your green room at these stadia are the private boxes that are obviously full of hospitality when the actual sport is on. But I have these boxes to myself, and they're always open. I can go out and sit in the stand of wherever I am, and just again soak up that kind of ghostly atmosphere of what's gone on before. It's I absolutely. I mean, I don't often like doing sportsman's dinners or anything like that because they're a bit too male heavy. But I would always accept a gig that put me into an empty stadium just so I could wander out into it because it's a great feeling.
That balance is like, what sort of jokes am I going to have to tell versus am I going to get a chance to have a look around somewhere where I really want to have a little nose?
Absolutely
Yeah.
right. I mean, I was in where was I at the beginning of the summer? I was doing a gig for the Concrete Society, an after lunch gig for the Concrete Society at the Oval, and my green room was the Mark Butcher Suite, which is just the most opulent thing I've ever seen in any stadium. It was like a carriage on the Orient Express. It was just like walnut and teak and padded cushions, velveteen cushions everywhere, and greens and dark reds. It was astonishing.
Yeah, they don't mess around in cricket with the hospitality. It's that thing where you're there for 8 hours of the day, and it's
Yeah,
those compared to football, which is 2 or 3 for your hospitality. You've got to have those nice little extra touches there. But yeah, it's the emptiness of stadiums is a really interesting thing. And I think I've been fortunate enough to be sort of behind the scenes of a few. So I've worked at Welford Road in Leicester for Leicester Tigers rugby, Nottinghamshire at Trent Bridge. And I always feel very privileged always when you're there, and there's only a few of you there. But I feel a little bit naughty, a little bit. There's a mischievous schoolboy in me almost that's just what who's going to stop me if I want to go and do something
yeah,
now?
it
Like if
is. Yeah.
occasionally I'd do a drop kick over the crossbar at Welford Road, and I was probably risking my job because someone would have been a complete arsehole about it. But I was just like, this is brilliant. I'm playing at Welford Road.
No, I agree. There is something that makes you want to run out onto the pitch, no matter where you are.
Mm.
But also, it's also, I think, for me as well, it's the kind of um, the mundanity of why you're there. Like, for instance, the Coventry City, the whatever it's called these days, the one the arena,
The Building Society Arena. Yeah.
Building Society Arena. That's it, and it's had a checkered history already, isn't it? I think Wasps played there. Coventry don't even play there anymore, or maybe they do. I don't know. It changes quite a lot. But I remember being there and looking at it and looking at they had the heat lamps on the goal mouth to try and make the grass grow quicker in that area because it had become worn down, and it was all incredibly high tech and looked absolutely pristine. But I was there to host some DIY magazine awards, and it just the two worlds. I would go downstairs and please give it up for paint scraper of the year or whatever, and then you go back up to your green room, which is this box overlooking this pristine stadia, and just imagine that you were, I don't know, just someone else just scoring a goal, whatever, in front of thousands and thousands. And there's something about that I think there is a childish aspect to it, definitely, but it's something that you grow up with if you're a fan of sport, and it's nice to still have that there.
It really is. So if you were sort of writing a dream ticket, what's the sort of dream corporate booking that someone could come to you and they could be telling you that you're going to present the civil engineering products expo or whatever something something as dull as that, but they're like, but it's going to be here, and you'd just be like, I'll do it for free.
I think it would probably be Lords for
Mm.
me. Um, I really like Lords as a place anyway, because I've been there a lot over the years, and there's a kind of with English cricket, I think and Lords almost especially more than other venues I've been to, is that you get such an astonishing array of people. For the spectrum of people at Lords I remember sitting in the grandstand once, and we had a fairly rowdy bunch of lads in front of us, and then blokes behind us who were wearing the public school, pink jeans with a yellow cravat on a blue shirt and no socks and loafers and stuff like that. So you could kind of lean back, and you'd hear the conversation from these bankers essentially behind you. And I remember one of them saying, "So, Jeremy, are you still involved in that teak business in Sudan?" And that was the conversation behind you. And then you'd lean forward, and the lads in front of you are having something like, "Do you remember? We were in Amsterdam? We painted Terry yellow." And I love that kind of you've got just everything is going on there. So I would love to go to Lords. I'd love to do something.
It's an amazing place, and I think obviously the main linkage between Carrow Road and Lords would be Stephen Fry. But that's a little aside. But
Yes, of course,
yeah,
of course.
but there's something about Lords. There's places. I think it is quite uniquely English. It's almost like there's an element of sport which is on the sort of the circuit, and Lords is very much on the circuit. Ascot is on the circuit, and there's Henley and all this
Yeah.
kind of thing where it's just like we're going to give you a glimpse. We're going to give you a glimpse of how things are really done.
There is. There's a kind of season to it, and you feel almost like a debutante going to their first ball when you first go to Lords, and it's also one of those places that, like so many stadia, I guess, that you go in and you are astonished at how small it actually is, and how compact. And you think when you're looking at these things on television before you go there, and then you go somewhere like Lords, the television makes it look so much bigger than it actually is, and just how intimate a place like Lords or Carrow Road or whatever actually is. Um, I did. I was interviewed on Test Match Special at Lords, so I went up into the media box, and that is just the most amazing sporting view you could ever have. It just doesn't get better than that. Doesn't in every way. I mean, I'd grown up with Test Match Special anyway, so that was always bucket list stuff to be interviewed on there. But to go up and see the view that they get and hear the slightest nick off the bat, and that's the great thing about sport, live sport especially, is that you do hear everything. And I think sometimes that gets the idea of that and how much that is part of the senses is being lost. I've been to recently in the last few years. I went to the Women's World Cup semi-final, England versus the USA in Lyon, and this year I went to Stade de France for the Olympics, and also we went to see a football match in the Olympics as well, which was at Parc des Princes. And there's so much of that live experience is being lost because whoever makes these decisions feels that you must drown out any kind of homemade atmosphere with music or worse DJs, kind of trying to build up this false atmosphere that it just doesn't need. You're getting in the way, and I find that stuff really irritating.
I was also at the Paris Olympics, and I don't think you were ever more than 10 minutes away from "Aux Champs-Élysées"
Yeah,
tinkling,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a nice little song, but I'd only was only there 3 days, and I was already bored of it.
yes,
And it's
yeah.
just this
Oh,
it's
completely.
very different. I mean, there's definitely place for it, and you've got. I'm quite conscious when we talk to people, and I sort of skew older. I'm very old before my time. It is important to bring new people to sport,
Yeah,
but but if all you're bringing them for is the ephemera and the baubles attached to it, you're not actually creating sports fans. There's a place for it, but it's hugely over reliant. And I think and it's hard with a sort of pop up event like the Olympics to kind of get that tonality right, because
Yeah.
as soon as it's up and running, you're almost, it's too weak to, it's hard to make those sort of tonal shifts over time and sort of understand that.
I do agree with that. It's just I think that you can take a decision actually almost on the day about whether something needs the atmosphere or not. I mean, the football that we went to see for the Olympics this year was it was a real hot ticket. It was the vast amounts of money was changing hands for Azerbaijan versus Ecuador, but we managed to get in. And, and but the beauty of it was that there was this section on the opposite side of the Parc des Princes to us, which was just full of Azerbaijani fans with drums and everything, and they were creating this wonderful atmosphere, which would then be drowned out every 5 minutes by "Oh Champs Elysees" or worse, "Sweet Caroline." I mean, sweet. I Nobody bends at the knee more than I to Neil Diamond. Okay, I'm a big fan of Neil Diamond, but for crying out loud, "Sweet Caroline" is ruining sport. It's I it's everywhere. It's a pestilence now that just can't be. You can't rein it in now. I mean, what again? We were at the Stade de France and we were watching. One of the events we were watching was the women's shot put. That's the beauty of the Olympics. But you're watching the women's shot put, and then in between a break, as they had the first round of shots or putts or whatever they call them, there's Sweet Caroline. What the hell has Sweet Caroline got to do with women's shot put in the Olympics? It's not creating an atmosphere. It's just getting on people's nerves. It's getting on my nerves. I mean, my kids are perfectly fine because I think they've grown up with it. This kind of 2020ization of atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other vaguely generic songs that you could go to as well. I mean, this is where we're going to find out. Someone's going to point out that 6 out of the 12 shot putters were called Caroline, and it was justified in that one situation and one situation only. But there's a really good, like the Rugby World Cup in France was sort of appalling for this. Actually, I love the atmosphere. Everyone travelling for the
Yeah,
2023 Rugby World Cup. Um, the teams that brought lots of fans were really brilliant, and I was in the stadium in Nantes for an Argentina Japan game because I'm cool and that's what I do. But Argentina and Japan were two of the teams that brought so many fans, and Argentina's fans in rugby are well known
yeah.
for their passionate singing, and there would be like an injury break. And all right, if the atmosphere was flat, I get it, play something, but the Argentina fans were singing their songs. The rest of the crowd were singing Je t'aime Nippon in a sort of, and which I actually understand is not how you say Japan in French, but we thought it was the crowd. But it's just like that would have been fine just to let this to go backwards and forwards. But no, I forget what it got filled with. But yeah, that frustrating.
It's a curse. It just is a curse. But I mean, that's the way modern sport goes. On television as well. Like I say, when I was working in India, and I would watch cricket on Indian television, there'd be an advert between every ball, and that's just the way it's going. You can't have any downtime or silence. I mean, and yeah, and no, you can't have silence because you can't trust there to be a silence anymore, or you can't trust the reasons behind that silence, which means that when you have these moments of respect, apart from Armistice Day, if a player's died or a former player's died now, you don't have a minute's silence for that player. It's a minute's applause, as if we have to have noise all the time.
What's also struck me is obviously you've got this breadth of of sporting experiences. I think like a lot of brought up in the sort of grandstand era, and just I'm
Yeah,
not just a football fan. I'm a sport fan, and I'll dip into cricket, athletics, etc.
yeah,
However, talking to you, I mean, a lot of these are sort of either English examples or in that sort of Anglosphere of cricket, etc.
Yeah.
You've been living in France for a little while. Are there any stadiums or sporting venues in France that you think are particularly special?
I found the Tour de France quite an amazing atmosphere, and obviously there's no specific
Mm.
venue unless you come to the Champs Elysees at the end of it. But there is this kind of, it does feel like very much that you are almost creating this pop up venue every time you stand on a street corner in the Tour de France, and it is incredibly exciting, um, in a weird way as well, because when you're standing there waiting for the cyclists, about an hour before the cyclists come through, there's something that they call the caravan, which is basically all the teams and team sponsors drive through, blaring out music, but chucking out freebies from the back of these sort of wacky races style cars that they've pimped up to represent whatever, Red Bull or whatever, something like that. And they chuck out these freebies, and it's an incredibly um, almost heartwarming throwback to a world with no health and safety whatsoever, because you get people getting downed on the sidelines by mini cans of Red Bull and cuts above the eye from key rings thrown by insurance companies. And I found that really good fun. I found that it kind of created its own atmosphere. But then you've got to wait for an hour after that caravan has gone through before the cyclists come through. And the first time I went to see it was further south, and it was near the Pyrenees, and there'd been a protest about 2 miles further up, from us, or further up from where the cyclists were heading. The farmers, bless them, French farmers who don't miss an opportunity to cause havoc, had set fire to these hay bales in the middle of the road where the cyclists were supposed to come. So all the cyclists had to come to a halt, while all this was cleared away. And so they'd all bunched into one great big peloton, which means that when they passed us about 2 miles down the road or whatever, the whole of the Tour de France that we'd then been waiting for about 4 or 5 hours lasted less than 10 seconds. And it just all went like that, and that was it. That was all there was. And my abiding memory of that was that there was this couple just not far from us, about 20 yards from us, who'd set up about the same time as we had, and they'd set up this barbecue and everything, and they got out their picnic table and they'd open a bottle of wine, and they'd sat down and they were having their lunch, and then the Tour de France went past. Everybody else starts clearing up, and they're just sitting there. They clearly hadn't known what to expect. And a policeman goes over to them and he says, "That's it. It's it's gone. You've got to start clearing up now. You can't just sit here in the road having your barbecue." And they just looked at him, and I think it was the bloke. He just went, "Is that it?" It's just, is that it? I've been here all day and I've been cooking this barbecue, and that's it. So I did enjoy that. I did enjoy that a lot.
So I love the Tour. It plays to the same sort of instinct in me that enjoys Test cricket and like World Series baseball. Like the longer and more boring and nuanced a sport can be made, the more I'm like, yes, get me into this detail. Like,
There is something really bloody minded about it. I agree. I agree completely with that. I mean, I've just before we came up on to record here, I was downstairs watching the T10 in in Abu Dhabi, and you just know that in the end, in 20 years' time, cricket will just be literally the toss. It'll be the toss, and then they'll all just walk off, and there'll be we won't bother about pitches and weather. We'll just toss a coin, and it'll get so short. The first time I went to any stadium in France was when I was 10, no, 11, and we were on holiday, and my dad had booked me and him tickets to go and see Monaco versus Laval, which I don't even know if it was League 1 or League 2 at that point. I think it probably was League 1 because Monaco had Ralph Edstrom, who must have been good because he was in my top trumps of 78, 79. So he must have had some kind of reputation. And we had our tickets and we went in, and there was these two Frenchmen sitting in our seats, and they wouldn't move, and they were really quite. Now you see, I can say this right because I'm French. I am French. I have French nationality, but they were very French. They were overtly French and really bullshitty French, and they wouldn't move. They just wouldn't move. So that was my first experience of the King Louis II. Is it the King Louis II Stadium in Monaco? I think it's called that. And until I took my kids back it must be a few years ago now. It always seems more recent than it is. But I went to see me and my two eldest sons went to see Spurs on a pre-season warm-up play in Monaco, and it was quite the thing because you had playing for Monaco, you had Carvalho, the other Portuguese guy who played for Wolves for quite a bit. They were managed by Ranieri, and Spurs had this new kid that they had high hopes of. It was Harry Kane, and he was playing. And I remember saying to my oldest son at the time, I said, "This bloke is awful. He can't control the ball. He's got no idea where the goal is." So that was that was another one of my great punditry efforts. But I mean, Spurs lost 5-1 as well, as I remember. Andros Townsend scored, I think it was. But I love that stadium because it's really open, and obviously, if you're in Monte Carlo and you can see like the Alps at the back, and you got the bay, that's a beautiful setting. That's a beautiful setting.
I'm interested on your take on that because that stadium used to have, I guess the BBC phrasing would be undue prominence because it was always on the super. It was always the Super Cup venue that Sky just couldn't be bothered to bid for, or whoever, and so it would often be on the BBC, and stuck on BBC Two on a Thursday night or whatever it was, and you would see that, and you'd also see that stadium a lot through sort of like wasn't even Diamond League then, but like Golden League athletics and things like that. It never looked full.
Yeah, no, I don't think it ever was because obviously the thing about Monaco and Monte Carlo is that if you work there, it means you haven't got any money. And it means that you probably don't live in Monte Carlo. You live in Nice, which is, 20 minutes down the road. And if you do live there, you're not going to bother yourself with sport because you probably are a professional sportsman avoiding tax. So the idea that the stadium is bound to be empty nearly all the time. I remember seeing same holiday. No, it might have been a different holiday. Anyway, I was there and I remember just walking down the street and Linford Christie and Colin Jackson and all these people were just having a lovely meal outside a restaurant. There is something about Monte Carlo as a place and as a venue that is stunning. It's just it certainly it's always in my circuit. I've because obviously the Formula One thing. I've driven the course, not in a Formula One car and not when it's all barricaded off, but I've driven it in my dad's old. It would have been a Vauxhall Carlton. In 1992, Vauxhall Carlton I've driven, and I've driven around it since then because I've been back to Nice quite a lot. It's where the south of France is where I go when I need a rest, when I need to, just need to bump myself up a bit psychologically. I go down to the south of France, so I've driven that quite a lot.
It's not a bad place to go.
No,
It's not a bad.
no.
I was on a similarly sort of recuperative holiday to Antibes down there recently, and I decided I'd go to Monte Carlo because I thought, oh God, we'd done Cannes and we'd been around, and I was just like, well, let's go there. I get to tick another country off my list technically, um, and I accidentally ended up walking a lot of that Formula One course because. And I guess they become rich for this reason, but France and the UK, wonderful sort of data sharing. If you go abroad, your mobile phone roaming package works fine. Didn't think of it. I've been there a while. As soon as you get into the borders of Monte Carlo, they want to charge you about like €5 for a megabyte of data, and it's just like, I had no maps. I was sort of stranded,
Yeah.
and I was navigating by turns. I'd watched Murray Walker guide people through. It was a very sort of surreal experience. But it's obviously a beautiful place, much hillier than you imagine, like from the TV. I guess that's the thing you're talking about, of the TV making things small. You'd think, oh, it's not, but oh my God, the levels of there and the steepness.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's superb.
It's such a false place. I mean, it's such a Shangri-La, isn't it? Really. I mean, if I could
Mm,
afford to live there, that would be the last place I'd want to live because I wouldn't want to be
yeah.
surrounded by all those people who live there. So it's a really kind of weird place, but it is again like Empty Stadia. It's kind of dreamy, and there's always an element of James Bond about it, and I
Mm.
kind of love the place when I go back there. I do try and see something when I'm there.
I remember the first person I bumped into literally when coming out of the train station was, and I think I'm legally allowed to say this, the disgraced former billionaire Sir Philip Green. He seems the perfect Monte Carlo resident to me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely right. I saw him there. I was gigging in Monte Carlo. I was gigging at the Monte Carlo Yacht Club, which is somewhat different from upturned beer crates and plywood in the corner of the tub. I've come a long way, but but yes, I was wandering around because I love ports. I love just the possibility of ports. The potential of where you can go and what is there and all that. And
Mm.
I walked. Yeah, and you see somebody like that approach, and you go, I could just slap him. I could just slap him, and I would hear that applause for the rest of my life.
There's people that you see that primarily through a TV, TV news lens, that when you see them in real life is very discombobulating. I remember once being
Yeah,
um, on a in what's it? Is it Dulles Airport in Washington? And Jerry Adams walks past
yeah.
me, and I was just a chill. I was just like, oh, it's just like, you're from the TV.
You do get it. Funnily enough, I was on a flight to now. Where was I going? England were playing. This was the 2016 Euros, and I was flying from City Airport somewhere. I can't remember where I was going now. I don't know, but I know. But Martin McGuinness, the late Martin McGuinness, and obviously colleague of Jerry Adams, was on the plane, and I don't know why I remember that. Oh yes, I know why I remember that because the pilot, England were actually playing as we were on the plane. We hadn't taken off, and the pilot or the stewardess or whoever the purser announces, "Can you please all turn your phones off now and all put them on flight mode? We're going to start the engines on. We're going to take off. It's very important that you turn off your phones. So don't want to interfere with the instruments." 2 minutes later, almost the entire flight just erupts with yes, and it and that's when Daniel Sturridge scored, I think, against Wales. And the pilot had to come on and goes, "Okay, now we've all had our fun. England have won. Can you now turn your phones off?" It was very funny.
I think we've all been in those situations. Ian, thank you so much. I'm going to have to apologise probably to Norwich City fans because it's not been as traditionally focused on Carrow Road as some of our other episodes. I'm going to admit that. I have enjoyed the journey.
Well, the thing is, I'm not as focused as a lot of people. I think that is fair to say. I've lived and travelled so much that I've never been a regular anywhere. Do you know what I mean? I've never been so regular. That is my regular sporting haunt. Um, I'll get a true story about what is my regular. One of the things I do miss about living in the UK is that I don't have a local. I don't have a local pub that I can go to and see regulars and whatnot and just sort of shoot the breeze or whatever. The closest I've got over the last 20 years that I've lived in France to having a local was I was working in London probably doing some corporate thing, and I was missing the Eurostar. I was going to miss the Eurostar, but I ran and made it and just dived onto the Eurostar in time. And I happened to dive into the buffet car, and the bloke behind the bar on the Eurostar he just looked at me and he went, "Ah, monsieur, you're back again. Rosé as usual." And so my local is actually a Eurostar, so I'm not focused on any particular place at all. So yes, apologies to Norwich City fans.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for sharing those memories of Carrow Road, those memories of the Oval, of Lords, of Monaco, of everything that we managed to cover during that time. I do have a slight regret. It's when you mentioned King's Lynn at the start, I realised, listening back and editing, that I didn't take the opportunity, which may be my only ever opportunity on this podcast, to talk about the walks. One of the King's Lynn's, not one of King's Lynn's greatest stadiums, it's King's Lynn's greatest stadium, home of King's Lynn Town, the Linnets, great nickname. And it's a magnificent old grandstand running along the one side of the pitch. It really is a proper sort of throwback. And I wonder whether he ever went to any games at the walks. If you do get a chance, if you ever find yourself in Norfolk and King's Lynn are at home, do go, because I think it's a magnificent non-league stadium. So yeah, sorry I didn't talk about King's Lynn. I apologise. Don't know what's coming next week yet. It very much depends. I haven't got anything edited. I haven't got anything prepared, but there are interviews in the pipeline. So yeah, you can be just as surprised as me when it drops next week. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
I'm Jennifer Garner. You may know me from my other job, but I'm a business owner too. Here at Once Upon a Farm, we chose the Capital One Venture X business card because it makes everything we do even more rewarding. With no preset spending limit, our purchasing power adapts to meet our business needs. And unlimited double miles on every purchase means we earn more too. And when we travel, we get access to over 1,300 airport lounges. The Capital One Venture X business card. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/VentureXBusiness.